What is up, dreamers? Figment494 here, coming to you straight from your imagination, and today I have for you my Decidueye Ninetales deck that I used to get top 8 at the League Cup up in Dayton, Ohio this past weekend, going 4-0-2 into Top Cut, and losing in top 8 to Greninja, but yeah, hopefully we're going to end up fixing this by next week. So we're going to start off here. We got a 4-2-4 line of Decidueye. Of course, 2 Dartrix, we run Rare Candy, so obviously don't need too thick of a line of it. Of course, the 2, though, just in case if you miss it, to manually evolve isn't actually too bad going in, especially with this format and how a lot of Stage 2 decks are popping up now. It's very, very easily to just quickly go up to Decidueye and keep pace with a lot of these other decks in format. Now, I also have a 3-1 line of Alolan Vulpix and Alolan Ninetales here. I've got one of the baby Alolan Ninetales here from Burning Shadows. It has its ability, Luminous Barrier, which prevents all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon GX or Pokemon EX Pokemon. Now, this is very useful in a lot of matchups, where a lot of decks that don't have an answer to this, especially with Hex Maniac being gone in the format, you can very easily just sit this Pokemon up in front, and all they have to get around it are Guzmas, and most decks with only running 2 or 3 anymore, it's very easily just to sit up there and stall up there with Ninetales. So I really like it's very strong. Of course, you have Ninetales in it of itself, which has its attack Ice Blade, which hits for 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, and then of course Ice Path, which is its GX move, which moves all damage counters off of it, effectively healing it, and throwing it all into your opponents. It's very versatile in being able to have a variety of attacks, and Blizzard Edge, of course, which hits for 160 with Choice Band 190. Very, very good. Now we also have the Beacon Vulpix. Have 4 of these guys. This is very this is actually for consistency purposes. So most games, if you start off opening hand or whatever, and you have a Vulpix, you can at least guarantee if you're going second, you can Beacon and go for some more Pokemon to set up for next turn, so you'll never be into a dead hand situation. Now, of course, that being said, you got Tapu Lele GX in the deck. Of course, run 2 of these guys in here. Tap Energy Drive, not that bad of an attack to begin with in the deck. Of course, you want your main attacker is Ninetales, but is always a good fallback attacker if needed. And especially if your opponent is ramping up a ton of energy on, let's say, a Gardevoir, you can quickly attach a DCE, and with a couple of Decidueye Feather Arrows, you could be scoring knockouts on a Gardevoir that's fully charged. Now, of course, we also run Espeon on the list here, mainly for its attack, Miraculous Shrine, which de-evolves each of your opponent's Pokemon, puts them into their hand, with Feather Arrows and Ice Blade from Ninetales and Decidueye. That can very easily score some knockouts on Pokemon such as Metagross and Gardevoir, which require rare candies most times to evolve, and in a lot of decks where they're only running like 1 or 2 Kirlia or 1 or 2 Metang to make sure you can just de-evolve it and force them to have some form of evolving means to get back up to that Stage 2 Pokemon. Of course, that being said, we have Tapu Koko on the list, only a 1 of, which you normally see about 2 to 3 in a normal Ninetales list, but since we're running Decidueye in this variant, this attacks that you would normally use with a Flying Flip to spread damage early on, you can now refocus your attacks and power onto the Ninetales using the Decidueye to get the extra chip damage against some of these Pokemon. And Tapu Koko in general, for your treat, very nice pivot Pokemon if you need it on the field, and Flying Flip, not a bad attack at all, hitting 20 to everything on the field. Now moving on to the supporter count here, we have 4 Sycamore, so you can make sure you can just draw supporters here. We got 3 N, and then the one-off supporters here, we've got 1 Acerola, 1 Guzma, and 1 Bridget. A lot of 1-drops, however, Guzma you don't really necessarily need with this deck. In most situations, you're going to be sniping the bench anyways with Decidueye and Flying Flip, and Espeon to de-evolve the high HP attackers. Guzma, of course, you just run 1 of anyways to make sure you can have effectively a Lysander at the end of the game to get a knockout on, let's say, Tapu Lele late game, or just to take some prizes early on, or to even stall out a Pokemon that doesn't have a Floatstone attached, maybe, and then use Feather Arrows and Ice Blade to attack the bench. Now, Acerola, of course, a very useful card, especially when you have to sit up there and tank with Lele early on, or a Ninetales that's about to get knocked out. You can just Lele, Acerola, or if you have the Acerola in hand, Acerola, pick up a Pokemon, throw it all back down. Unfortunately, it's not as good with Force Giant Plants and Decidueye. However, it's still a good card to just pick up a Pokemon and prevent a lot of damage, especially against a mirror match in a way, if anyone else is crazy enough to run this deck. Decidueye Ninetales, if they're spreading damage onto you, you can just Acerola, pick up a Pokemon, don't have to worry about all that damage on it. Not a big deal. Now, of course, Bridget, that's one of your big setup cards in this deck. You can go for first game, you can Ultra Ball, tap Lele, Bridget, pull out Rowlets, your Vulpix, Tapu Koko, whatever else you want to pull out, depending on the matchup. And, of course, what better way to get a Tapu Lele than with 4 Ultra Balls. So you can guarantee, almost guarantee, every game you're going to get into an Ultra Ball to get for Tapu Lele early on for Bridget. Of course, if Bridget's prized, that kind of slows down the deck, but you have that built-in attack with Beacon. Allows you to go for 2 Pokemon just to start setting up your field anyways. Now, of course, we run the 2 Dartrix earlier. We have 3 Rare Candy in this list. I run a 3-2 split with Dartrix and Rare Candy. Rare Candy, I really like being able to go straight from Rowlet to Decidueye. It's 10 times more efficient, and it's actually fairly consistent in the games that I played over the weekend. It was fairly consistent to be able to draw straight into Rare Candy Decidueye, or Rare Candy Ultra Ball, or even just to draw into both at the same time and not have to do anything to go for it, but it's also very useful. Now, moving on here, we also have 3 Field Blower in the list. This is mainly for fighting Fury Ball, which it's kind of popular in a lot of Turtonator Ho-Oh decks, which this can struggle with if you don't have a Ninetales set up early on, or a couple Tapu Koko spreads. But otherwise, it's still a very good card. I like it a lot. It's very strong. And especially over this past weekend, this is, as I'm recording this, Regionals has finished, I believe, over in Germany or Spain. I don't remember offhand, forgive me for that, but with the success of Garb Drop, we could see more of those coming over into League Cups here in the US. And if that becomes more successful, Field Blower is going to become a very vital card in this list, as being able to get a Float Stone off both Trubbish or a Garbodor to make sure you can always have the Feather Arrows for extra damage is very, very important. And it gets rid of a lot of cards such as Choice Band in the format, which can be used to get a lot of extra damage onto a Ninetales, and if you can take both of those out early on, or get your opponent into an awkward situation where they can't get the knockout on a Ninetales, and they have to risk being Ice Pathed, I feel like being able to take out 2 cards against your opponent is very, very strong. And again, we were talking earlier about Guzmaing up a Pokemon that doesn't have a Float Stone attached to potentially stall. That's also very good if you Field Blower away enough of their retreat tools. You can just sit there and spread with Feather Arrow and Ice Blade. Now, for your own tools, we have 2 Choice Band on the list, of course. Not running too heavy of a line of it, because you don't want to be too susceptible to another Field Blower as well. And in addition to this, Choice Band you don't really need in this deck, because most times you're just going to be hitting with Ninetales and chip damage with Decidueye, so you can eventually de-evolve Pokemon with Espeon. And when you do need the Choice Band onto a Ninetales with Blizzard Edge hits for 190 damage. With a Flying Flip and a couple Feather Arrows, you're knocking out basically everything in the format. It's very good. Another 2 tools you're going to be running in the list here. We got 2 Float Stone. Now, Float Stone, of course, well, we already have a good pivot with Tapu Koko. This is on the event that, so let's say Tapu Koko's prized. You have Float Stone, which is generally a very good card to have in your list. You can attach to a Decidueye, which has a 2 retreat cost. In this list, we do not run any Grass or Rainbow Energy, so effectively Decidueye is mainly only there for the Feather Arrow, so it serves no purpose other than that. So Float Stone attaching to a Decidueye is mostly what you want to do with this deck, so you can easily retreat. Of course, since it's only a 2 retreat cost, a simple double colorless can save you, but it's still useful to have regardless. Float Stone, of course, you can, on very rare occasions, this weekend I attached to a Ninetales so I could retreat into another Ninetales and attack with that, or you have the 2 Float Stones to attach to a potential Espeon start or a Lele start, so you can retreat into a Beacon off of a Vulpix. It's very efficient in that way. And we've got 3 one-off trainers here. We've got 1 Special Charge. A Special Charge, since we're running double colorless energies, you can very easily cycle pack energies throughout the game. And if there is a Ninetales that's fully set up with a Blizzard Edge, ideally you can be using the attack and attaching a double colorless energy and discarding it to fulfill the 2 discard requirement for the attack. Hitting for 160 damage with a couple chip damage. It's very, very strong. Special charge allows you to consistently hit that. And in addition to that, when you have rough hands early on, Ultra Ball to get rid of potentially DCE or 2 isn't that bad when you can just special charge it back late game. Now, of course, with that, we have a Revitalizer and a Rescue Stretcher. These act as your Pokemon, just to gather your Pokemon back from the discard pile during the game. Now, Revitalizer I found very useful in a lot of games where you're able to have Decidueye in your discard pile, and you could just Revitalize or bring it back, Rare Candy, and just throw a Decidueye on the board right after having a Rowlet out for a turn. It is also useful, again, like where you have rough hands, where you just sick of more stuff early on. Revitalizer, just throw a Pokemon back into your hand, evolve from a Dartrix, whatever you need to do. If you have to discard Dartrix early on, Revitalizer, just to get that back, is very, very efficient, and it's not that bad at all. The Rescue Stretcher is a little more versatile in this approach, where you can choose Pokemon for your discard pile and put it straight into your hand. So you can get an Espeon potentially late game if your opponent misses it. I had an opponent do that to me in one of my matches. He just didn't notice I had an Espeon in the deck, and I was just spreading damage around, and then suddenly Rescue Stretcher, attach, de-evolve, take 4 prizes in a turn. Good game, sir. And Rescue Stretcher in general, just being able to shuffle in 3 Pokemon from your discard pile as well. If you would like to do that, you can shuffle in Ninetales if you have to discard those early on. If you can't hit a Revitalizer, it's also good to just shuffle in Decidueye lines back into your deck. If you need to get a Tapu Lele late game, just Rescue Stretcher, bring it up, grab an Acerola or a Bridget, or not even a Bridget, a Guzma, or an N, or whatever other supporter you may need at the time. It's very efficient. Now, in addition to this, of course, to make sure we can guarantee the Blizzard Edge to have as much damage going on the board as possible, and to make sure we can always have energy in hand to attach, we have 7 Water Energy in this deck. This is mainly to make sure you can always hit the 2 Water Energy required to use Blizzard Edge. It's a very good attack. In addition to this Water Energy, I like having not Special Energy in your deck, especially with some Golisopod GX decks now running Enhanced Hammer, as my friend Ryan did over the weekend, who ended up winning the tournament. And Enhanced Hammer, you just don't want to be as susceptible. Of course, with DCEs, you're already kind of susceptible to getting an Enhanced Hammer early on. But first turn, if you were to attach a Water Energy, there's a very high chance it's going to be able to stay on the board unless your opponent's running Team Flare Ground or any other form of Plumeria or any other random cards to play Disruption, Crushing Hammers. But, of course, we run 4 double colorless to finish out this list here for a total of 11 energy in the deck. Of course, I'm still looking to change this as we go throughout the season, or at least the first quarter here. We got 7 waters here. I can't really space them out, but you know they're there. I got 4 double colorless energies for a total of 11 energy in the deck. Most games that guarantees you're at least going to have an energy in your opening hand, so you can start attaching to something with a Lele, Bridget, start pulling out maybe a Coco, attach an energy for the turn there, and being able to Flying Flip, or attach Water Energy to a Vulpix first turn, so you can make sure maybe next turn, if you're needing to have the Safeguard Ninetales out, you can attach Double Colorless and be able to have that ready and powered up for the next turn. All in all, it's a very, very consistent list from what I found over the weekend, especially with Beacon, just being able to go for Pokemon as you need. And all in all, it's just, this is my list. This is Decidueye Ninetales. Hopefully going to be making a comeback into the format. And hope you guys liked the list. If there's anything you'd like to ask, please leave a comment down below. And peace out. Keep on dreaming, guys.